For most of my life, I believed my father was the kind of man people only pretended to be. His name was Richard Whitman, and in our town that name meant something. It meant reliability. It meant generosity. It meant the man who always showed up early to church fundraisers, stayed late to stack chairs, and remembered the names of every waitress, mailman, mechanic, and school secretary within a 20-mile radius. People loved my father. They loved the way he shook hands with both of his palms like he was giving you his full attention. They loved the way he laughed at jokes that weren't funny. They loved the way he wrapped one arm around my mother's shoulders whenever they stood together in public as if he were silently telling the world, "When I was younger, I loved that too." I loved being Claire Whitman, daughter of Richard and Margaret Whitman, the couple everyone at Grace Community Church called the gold standard. I loved hearing women tell my mother, "You're so lucky, Margaret," while my father pretended to be embarrassed and kissed her cheek. My mother would always smile. Not a wide smile, not a happy, glowing smile, just a small, practiced one. I didn't understand it then. By the time I was 28, I understood enough to know that perfect families were usually the ones with the most carefully locked doors. That September, I drove back to my parents' house in Fairbrook, Ohio, for what was supposed to be a happy weekend. Their 30th wedding anniversary was coming up, and my mother had somehow allowed the church committee to turn it into a full community celebration. There would be catered food, old photos, speeches, music, and because this was Fairbrook, at least 3 women arguing over who made the best potato casserole. My father was also being honored that night with a local award from the church, Family Man of the Year. When my mother told me over the phone, I had laughed. "Family Man of the Year? Is that a real award?" "It is now," she said dryly. I could hear dishes clinking in the background, and then my father's voice, distant but cheerful. "Tell Claire we're expecting her by dinner." My mother paused before answering me. "Your father says drive safe." There was something about the way she said it that made me sit still for a second after the call ended. But I pushed the feeling away. I had been doing that a lot lately. When I arrived Friday evening, the house looked exactly the same as it had when I was growing up. White siding, blue shutters, 2 rocking chairs on the porch, a maple tree in the front yard that dropped red leaves all over the walkway every fall. My mother had planted yellow mums by the steps, and the porch light was already on, glowing warm against the early dusk. For a moment, standing there with my overnight bag over my shoulder, I felt 12 years old again. Then the front door opened. My father stepped outside with his arms spread wide. "There's my girl!" I smiled because that was what my body had been trained to do. "Hi, Dad." He hugged me tightly. He smelled like cedar soap, coffee, and the faintest trace of aftershave. The smell of my childhood, the smell of Saturday morning pancakes and Sunday church clothes. The smell of a man I had trusted before I even knew what trust meant. "Traffic bad?" he asked. "Not too bad. You should have called when you got close. I would have helped with your bags." "It's 1 bag, Dad." Still. He took it anyway. Inside, my mother was standing at the kitchen counter, slicing tomatoes with careful, even strokes. She wore dark jeans, a cream sweater, and the pearl earrings my father had given her on their 20th anniversary. "Hi, Mom." She looked up, and her face softened in a way it never did for anyone else. There she is. Her hug was quieter than my father's, but it lasted longer. Dinner was roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and fresh rolls from Henley's Bakery downtown. Everything was warm, familiar, almost painfully normal. My father talked the entire meal. He talked about a new contract his company was bidding on. He talked about Pastor Glenn's bad knee. He talked about how the Browns down the street had finally taken down the inflatable Santa they had left in the garage window since last Christmas. My mother listened. She passed him the salt before he asked for it. She refilled his water. She smiled when he looked at her. But every time his phone buzzed on the table, her eyes flicked toward it. So did mine. The first time he ignored it. The second time he turned the phone face down. The third time he stood. "Sorry," he said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "Work thing. I'll be right back." "It's 7:30 on a Friday," I said. He gave me a charming, apologetic smile. "Construction doesn't care about weekends, sweetheart." Then he walked out of the kitchen and into the hallway. I heard the back door open, then close. For a few seconds, neither my mother nor I spoke. The silence sat between us like a third person. I looked at her. She was cutting her chicken into smaller and smaller pieces, though she had barely eaten. "Does he always take work calls outside now?" I asked. My mother didn't look up. "Sometimes." That wasn't a real answer. It was the answer I had. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "Mom." She finally looked at me. There were fine lines around her eyes that I didn't remember noticing before. Not age, exactly. Something heavier, something earned. "What?" she asked. I lowered my voice, even though my father was outside. "Don't you ever get tired of pretending you don't notice?" For the first time that evening, her hand stopped moving. The knife rested against the plate. She looked down at her wedding ring. The diamond caught the kitchen light and threw a tiny flash onto the wall. Then she said, very softly, "There's a difference between not noticing and waiting for the right time." A chill moved through me. Before I could ask what that meant, the back door opened again. My father came in smiling, sliding his phone into his pocket. "Sorry about that. Where were we?" My mother picked up her fork. I didn't answer. All weekend I watched him. Once you start watching someone you love, really watching them, every small thing becomes evidence. Saturday morning, he left before breakfast to check on a site. He came back 2 hours later carrying donuts, kissed my mother on the forehead, and acted as if he hadn't missed the entire morning. Saturday afternoon, while we sorted old family photos for the anniversary slideshow, he got another call. This time, he looked at the screen and his expression changed so quickly I might have missed it if I hadn't been staring directly at him. His smile dropped, not into anger, not into fear, into tenderness. That was worse. "I need to take this," he said. My mother didn't ask who it was. She only handed me another stack of photos and said, "Put the ones from the lake trip in a separate pile." I sat there holding a picture of my father teaching me how to fish when I was 8 years old. In the photo, I was laughing with my mouth wide open, and he was crouched beside me, proud as if I had pulled a shark out of Lake Erie instead of a 6-inch bluegill. I stared at the younger version of him, then at the hallway where the real one had disappeared. By Sunday afternoon, my nerves felt stretched thin. The anniversary celebration was 1 week away, and my mother was reviewing the guest list at the dining room table. My father was supposed to be helping Rhett, but he kept checking his watch. "You have somewhere to be?" I asked. He looked startled. "No, why? You keep looking at your watch." He laughed. "Habit." My mother made a small mark beside a name on the list. I noticed her hand was perfectly steady. At 4:30, my father stood. "I just remembered I promised to stop by Dan Miller's place. He's having trouble with his deck railing." I frowned. "Dan Miller moved to Arizona." The room went silent. My father blinked once, then he smiled. "Right, I meant his son, Tyler, bought the house from him." That was possible, maybe even true, but he said it too fast. My mother did not look up from the guest list. "Drive safely," she said. He kissed the top of her head. "Always." Then he turned to me. "Don't leave before I get back, okay? I want to hear more about work." "Sure," I said. He walked out with his keys in hand. From the window, I watched his truck pull out of the driveway and turn left toward the main road. Dan Miller's old house was to the right. I looked back at my mother. She was still writing. "Mom, Claire, please tell me I'm imagining this." Her pen paused. For 1 second, I thought she might finally say it, whatever was. The thing that had been living in the walls of this house, humming under every polite dinner conversation. Instead, she closed the guest list folder. "Some truths," she said, "have to arrive with proof. Otherwise, people just call them bitterness." I felt my stomach twist. What truth? She stood and carried the empty coffee mugs into the kitchen. I followed her. "What truth, Mom?" She rinsed one mug, then the other. Her shoulders were straight, but I could see the tension in her neck. "Not today," she said. "Why not?" "Because once I say it, you won't be able to unknow it." I almost laughed, but nothing about her face allowed it. Before I could push harder, a sound came from the dining room. A phone buzzing. Not mine. Not my mother's. My father had left his phone on the sideboard. We both turned toward it. It buzzed again. My mother closed her eyes for half a second. I walked into the dining room before she could stop me. The screen lit up with a message preview. No name, just a number. But the words were enough. I stared at the screen. My heartbeat thudded once, hard. Then again, "Ethan, Dad." I had no brother named Ethan. My father had no nephew named Ethan. No godson, no little cousin he visited every Sunday, no explanation that made sense. Behind me, my mother stood in the doorway. She didn't gasp, she didn't rush to grab the phone, she didn't pretend she hadn't seen it. She just looked at me with a sadness so calm it felt older than the house itself. My voice came out barely above a whisper. "Mom, who is Ethan?" For a long moment she said nothing. Then the phone buzzed again. Another message appeared. Sophie. Another name I did not know. Another child asking for my father. The room seemed to tilt around me. My mother walked over, picked up the phone, and turned it face down. Then she looked at me, not like a woman who had just discovered her husband's secret, like a woman who had been carrying it for years. "Sit down, Claire," she said quietly. My legs felt weak. "Mom, sit down." I pulled out a chair and lowered myself into it. Outside, the afternoon sun poured through the dining room window, bright and golden, falling across the old family photos still scattered on the table. There was my father holding me as a baby, my father dancing with my mother at a church picnic, my father smiling beside a birthday cake. My father, my father, my father, the perfect man, the perfect husband, the perfect lie. My mother sat across from me and folded her hands, and for the first time in my life I saw the truth in her eyes before she ever said a word. My mother did not explain everything that afternoon. That was the first thing that made me understand how deep the secret went. If it had been a simple affair, if it had been one woman, one mistake, one humiliating truth caught in a message on a forgotten phone, maybe she would have cried. Maybe she would have screamed. Maybe she would have thrown my father's phone against the wall and finally let 30 years of marriage break open in front of me. But she did none of those things. She only sat across from me at the dining room table, her hands folded, her wedding ring shining under the light like it belonged to someone else. "Mom," I whispered, "who are Ethan and Sophie?" Her face tightened, not in confusion, in pain. "They're children," she said. I stared at her. "Whose children?" She looked toward the family photos scattered between us. My father's smile was everywhere, on vacations, at birthday parties, beside Christmas trees, behind my mother at church dinners, his hand always resting on her shoulder like a claim. Then she looked back at me. "Your father's." I heard the words, but for a moment they did not enter me. They hung in the air, impossible and heavy. "No," I said. It was not an argument. It was a reflex. My mother's eyes softened. "Claire." "No," I repeated louder this time. "No, Dad doesn't have other kids." She didn't correct me. That was worse. I stood so quickly the chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "He doesn't," I said, even though the phone was still lying face down on the table, even though the messages had been real, even though my mother's face had already told me everything I was not ready to know. My mother rose slowly. "I didn't want you to find out this way." A strange laugh escaped me. "There was a better way?" She flinched. I regretted it immediately, but I was too angry to take it back. "How long?" I asked. She said nothing. "How long, Mom?" Her voice was almost too calm. "Ethan is 12. The room went silent again. 12. 12 years old. 12 birthdays. 12 Christmases. 12 school years. 12 years of my father being someone else's father, too. My knees weakened, and I grabbed the back of the chair. "And Sophie? 8. 8. I closed my eyes. I thought of all the times my father had missed dinner because of late meetings. All the Sunday afternoons he had disappeared to help someone from church. All the work trips that seemed too short to be real business and too frequent to question. My entire childhood rearranged itself inside my head. Not all of it. That was the cruel part. The memories were still there. My father still taught me how to ride a bike. He still came to my high school graduation. He still cried when he dropped me off at college. But now every memory had a shadow standing behind it. A second house, a second woman, 2 children who called him Dad. I pressed both hands against my temples. "Does she know?" My mother knew who I meant. "No." I opened my eyes. "The woman? She believes your father is divorced." The words hit me harder than I expected. I had imagined some glamorous mistress, some cruel woman who knew exactly what she was doing, someone I could hate without complication. But my mother's answer made hatred harder. "She thinks he's divorced?" I said. "Yes. And he told her that?" My mother nodded. I sat back down, not because I wanted to, but because my legs had become unreliable. "What's her name?" "Laura Bennett." The name sounded ordinary. That made it worse. I wanted it to sound dangerous, sharp, fake. But Laura Bennett sounded like someone who baked banana bread for PTA meetings. Where does she live? My mother hesitated. Across town, near Briar Lane. I knew the neighborhood. Small houses, clean lawns, swing sets in backyards. 20 minutes from my parents' home. Close enough that my father could live 2 lives without even crossing a county line. Have you met her? No. Have you seen her? My mother looked down. Yes. I swallowed. The answer should not have surprised me, but it did. When? 3 years ago. 3 years. My mother had known for 3 years, and I had known nothing. A second wave of anger moved through me. You kept this from me. I protected you. No, you didn't. My voice cracked. You left me living inside his lie. That time, she did not defend herself. She only nodded once, as if she had already said those same words to herself 100 times. You're right, she said. Her honesty disarmed me more than an excuse would have. The sound of my father's truck did not return for another hour. By then, my mother had put his phone back exactly where he left it. The messages were gone from the screen. The dining room looked normal again. The photos had been stacked into neat piles. The coffee mugs were washed. The house was quiet. When he walked in, my father was smiling. Sorry that took longer than I thought. He looked between us. Something in the room must have felt different because his smile faltered. Everything okay? My mother looked at him with the same calm expression she had worn all weekend. Everything's fine. He looked at me. Claire? I had never hated my own face as much as I did in that moment, because I could feel myself copying my mother, wearing the same small, controlled smile, saying the same polite lie. Fine, I said. His shoulders relaxed, and that was when I understood something terrifying. My father was good at lying because he trusted us to help him. The next morning I left early. I told my parents I needed to get back to Columbus for work, but I did not drive to Columbus. I parked 2 streets away from their house and waited. At 9:17, my father came out wearing jeans, a navy jacket, and the baseball cap he always wore when he wanted to look casual. He got into his truck and pulled out of the driveway. I followed him. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the steering wheel with both hands. I kept a few cars between us, terrified he would see me, terrified he would not. He drove through downtown Fairbrook, past the pharmacy, past the courthouse, past Grace Community Church, where a banner already announced the upcoming anniversary celebration. I nearly laughed. Then he turned toward Briar Lane. The neighborhood was exactly as I remembered. Modest ranch houses, tidy porches, basketball hoops, mailboxes painted with flowers and last names. Kids' bikes lay in front yards. A golden retriever barked behind a chain-link fence. My father slowed in front of a pale blue house with white trim. There was a small American flag by the porch, a baseball glove on the steps, pink chalk drawings on the driveway. My father parked at the curb. Before he even reached the walkway, the front door flew open. A boy ran out. He was tall and thin, with messy brown hair and a baseball jersey that hung loose on his shoulders. He moved with the loose-limbed energy of a child who had not yet realized the world could betray him. Dad. The word shattered something in me. My father dropped to one knee just in time for the boy to crash into him. He hugged him, not politely, not awkwardly. He hugged him the way he used to hug me when I was small and ran to him after a nightmare. I sat frozen in my car. A little girl appeared next. She wore a purple hoodie and had 2 uneven braids. She held a handmade sign with glitter letters I could not read from where I sat. My father opened one arm, and she ran into it. Then Laura Bennett stepped onto the porch. She was not glamorous. She was not wicked-looking. She was pretty in a tired, gentle way, with brown hair clipped at the back of her head and a cardigan wrapped around her like she had been interrupted while cleaning the kitchen. She smiled at my father. It was a wife's smile. A smile that said, I felt sick. My father stood, kissed the top of Sophie's head, ruffled Ethan's hair, and walked up the porch. Laura said something to him, and he laughed. Then she touched his arm lightly, naturally, as if she had done it 1,000 times before. Maybe she had. They went inside together. The door closed. I did not move. For several minutes, I could only stare at the house. That house had birthdays in it, homework, arguments over bedtime, half-finished cereal bowls, a child waiting at the window, a woman believing a man when he said he belonged to her. I wanted to hate them. I couldn't. That made everything worse. I drove away before my father came back out. But over the next few days I returned. I told myself I was gathering proof. I told myself I needed to understand before I confronted him. I told myself I was doing what my mother had done, watching, waiting, collecting the truth. But really, I think I was trying to make the impossible feel real. On Tuesday, I saw my father pick Ethan up from baseball practice. He clapped when Ethan ran toward him, then carried the boy's equipment bag to the truck. Ethan talked with his whole body, hands flying, face bright. My father listened like every word mattered. On Wednesday, I saw him take Sophie to an ice cream shop. She sat across from him with chocolate on her chin, and he wiped it away with a napkin. She giggled. He smiled. On Thursday evening, he stood in Laura's front yard repairing a loose fence board. Laura came outside with 2 glasses of iced tea. They talked by the porch steps as the sun went down. I watched from half a block away, feeling like a ghost haunting someone else's life. By Friday, I could not carry it alone anymore. I went back to my mother's house. She opened the door before I knocked, as if she had been expecting me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she stepped aside. In the dining room, the anniversary guest list was gone. In its place sat a thick blue. My mother placed her hand on top. I was going to show you after the party, she said. My throat tightened. After? Yes. Why after? Her expression changed then. Not sadness. Resolve. Because your father is planning to stand in front of this entire town next Saturday and accept an award for being a devoted family man. She opened the folder. Inside were photographs. My father on Laura's porch. My father at Ethan's baseball game. My father carrying Sophie on his shoulders at what looked like a 4th of July event. Then came bank statements, mortgage payments, insurance documents, a copy of a deed for the pale blue house on Briar Lane. My eyes stopped on my father's signature, Richard Allen Whitman, beside another name, Laura Bennett. My mother turned another page. Birth certificates, Ethan Michael Bennett, Sophie Grace Bennett. Father listed, Richard Allen Whitman. I covered my mouth. Oh my God. My mother sat down across from me. I've known for 3 years, she said. I looked up at her, unable to speak. She was calm, too calm. But now I understood that her calm was not weakness. It was preparation. She leaned forward and placed one final paper in front of me. It was an invitation, the same cream-colored invitation for the anniversary celebration. But this one had 3 names written across the envelope. My heart stopped. Mom, I whispered. Her eyes did not waver. I invited them. I stared at her. The room felt suddenly too small. You invited his other family to your anniversary party? No, she said quietly. I invited the truth. For a long time I couldn't speak. The invitation lay between us on the dining room table like a lit match. Laura Bennett, Ethan Bennett, Sophie Bennett. 3 names written in my mother's careful handwriting. 3 names that did not belong in our family. 3 names my father had spent years hiding, protecting, feeding, loving, and lying about. I stared at the envelope until the letters blurred. You can't do this, I finally said. My mother sat across from me, perfectly still. I already did. Then uninvite them. No, Mom. Claire. Her voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath it. I pushed the folder away from me as if the papers inside were burning my skin. They're children. I know. Then why would you drag them into this? For the first time, something sharp flashed across her face. I am not the one who dragged them into it. The words stopped me. My mother leaned back in her chair, and for a moment, she looked older than she had that morning. Not fragile, not broken, just tired in a way sleep would never fix. Your father did that, she said. He put them in the middle when he gave them his name on a birth certificate and gave me silence at my dinner table. I looked down. The truth was ugly from every angle. If Laura and her children came to the anniversary party, they would be humiliated. If they didn't, my father would stand in front of the town, smile under soft lights, and accept praise for being the kind of man he had never truly been. And my mother would have to sit beside him while everyone applauded. I imagined it. Pastor Glenn calling Richard Whitman a devoted husband, a loyal father, a man of faith. My father lowering his eyes modestly, pretending to be humbled. My mother standing next to him in pearls, clapping for her own humiliation. My stomach turned. Why didn't you tell me before? I asked. My voice came out smaller this time. My mother looked toward the window. Outside, the maple leaves shifted in the late afternoon breeze. The whole neighborhood looked peaceful, as if nothing inside this house had changed. "I wanted to," she said. "When?" "Every Thanksgiving when your father left early to check on the office. Every Christmas Eve when he kept his phone in his pocket and smiled every time it buzzed. Every birthday of mine when he brought flowers and then disappeared for 2 hours after dinner." She swallowed. "I wanted to tell you so many times that it became its own kind of pain." "Then why didn't you?" "Because you still loved him without questions." The answer hurt because it was true. I had not wanted to see my father clearly. Not really. I had noticed things. Of course I had. The missed dinners, the unexplained calls, the way my mother's smile never reached her eyes anymore. But noticing was not the same as knowing, and knowing required courage I had not been forced to have. My mother had been living with that knowledge for years, alone. "How did you find out?" I asked. She folded her hands on top of the table. "At first it was money." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Your father had always handled certain accounts for the business. I handled the household expenses. That arrangement worked for years because I trusted him." The word trusted landed heavily. "Then 3 years ago I got a call from the bank about a missed payment on a line of credit I didn't recognize. They said my name was attached to the account." My chest tightened. "What account?" "A home improvement loan." "For our house?" She gave a humorless little smile. "No, for hers." I looked at the folder again. My mother continued. "I asked your father about it. He said it was tied to a business property. He was so calm, Claire, so offended that I questioned him. He made me feel foolish for asking." I pictured my father's face, warm, patient, wounded in just the right way. I had seen him use that expression before when someone accused him of forgetting something or being unfair. He never yelled. He just looked disappointed, and people apologized. My mother must have apologized too. "I believed him for about 10 minutes, she said. "Then I checked the records myself." "You knew how?" "I learned." There was no pride in her voice, only fact. "I went to the county recorder's office. I searched property transfers. I found the house on Briar Lane. Your father's name wasn't on the deed at first. He was smarter than that. But his signature was on enough documents, contractor agreements, insurance papers, loan applications, school emergency contact forms." "School forms," her eyes darkened. "He listed himself as Ethan's father." I sat back. The room felt airless. "And Sophie's?" "Yes." I pressed my fingers against my mouth. There was something uniquely cruel about paperwork. A lie spoken aloud could vanish into the air. A lie written down stayed. It waited. It gathered weight. "How could he think no one would find it?" I asked. "Because he thought I would never look." My mother's voice did not break, but something in it made my eyes sting. For years, my father had not just lied to her. He had counted on her devotion, her politeness, her desire not to embarrass the family. He had built a second life on the foundation of her silence. "Did you confront him?" I asked. "Not then." "Why?" "Because by that point, I realized this wasn't only betrayal, it was financial." She opened the folder again and pulled out several statements. Some had highlighted numbers, some had notes written in the margins. He had been moving money for years, small amounts at first, then larger ones. Payments for the Briar Lane house, health insurance, summer camps, car repairs, gifts, vacations he told me were work conferences. My jaw tightened. "He took money from you." "From us," she corrected, "from the marriage, from the business assets I helped build, from the future we planned together." I stared at her. "You should have left him." "I know, Mom, I know," she repeated more firmly. Then she looked at me, and the calm mask slipped just enough for me to see what lived underneath it. Anger. Not loud anger, not wild anger. The kind of anger that had been pressed down so long it had turned into something colder and more dangerous. "But if I left him then," she said, "he would have controlled the story." I didn't answer. "He would have told everyone I was unstable, bitter, jealous. He would have said we had grown apart, that I misunderstood, that I was punishing him for helping a struggling woman and her children. The worst part was, I could hear him saying it. And people would believe him, because Richard Whitman was beloved, because Margaret Whitman was quiet." My mother looked toward the hallway, toward the framed wedding photo still hanging there. In the picture, she was 24, smiling in lace sleeves, standing beside a man who looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. He spent years building a reputation, she said, so I spent 3 years building proof. A chill moved through me. What proof? She began laying documents across the table. Bank statements, receipts, copies of text messages, photographs, a timeline, a list of dates when my father claimed to be away on business, matched with photos of him at Ethan's school events or Laura's family gatherings. My mother had built a case with the precision of someone who knew emotion would not be enough. There was even a letter from an attorney. I picked it up. You hired a lawyer? 2 years ago. 2 years? Yes. And Dad doesn't know? No. I stared at her. For the first time, I truly saw my mother, not as the quiet woman standing beside my father, not as the wife who refilled his coffee and smiled through his speeches, not as the woman I had mistaken for passive because she chose not to scream. She was not passive. She was patient. That realization frightened me a little. What happens at the party? I asked. My mother began gathering the papers again. That depends on him. On him? Yes. You invited Laura and the kids. You have all this evidence. You're planning something. I am planning the truth, she said. What he does with it will be his choice. I shook my head. Mom, this is going to destroy everything. No, Claire. Her voice softened. It is already destroyed. We've just been living inside the ruins. I looked away because I did not want her words to be true, but they were. The next few days passed in a strange, suspended state. My father called me twice. The first time I didn't answer. The second time I did. Hey, sweetheart, he said, cheerful as ever. You get home okay? I stood in my apartment kitchen, staring at a glass of water I had poured and forgotten to drink. Yeah. Good. Your mom said you seemed tired when you left. I was. Work stressful? Something like that. There was a pause. Then he chuckled softly. You sound serious. Everything all right? I gripped the edge of the counter. There were so many things I wanted to say. Do you have a son named Ethan? Does Sophie know she has a sister? How do you kiss Mom on the forehead and then drive across town to kiss another woman? Instead, I said, Are you happy, Dad? The question surprised even me. He went quiet. What kind of question is that? A simple one. Well, he gave a light laugh, but it sounded forced. Of course I am. I've got your mother. I've got you. I've been blessed. Blessed. The word nearly made me sick. You sure there's nothing else you want to tell me? Another pause. This one was longer. Then his voice changed, just slightly. Claire, did your mother say something to you? And there it was. Not concern. Fear. I closed my eyes. No, I lied. He exhaled. Your mom gets emotional around anniversaries. You know how she is. I opened my eyes. For 1 second, I felt something inside me harden. How is she, Dad? He hesitated. I just mean she can be sensitive. Sensitive. That was the word men like my father used when they wanted to make a woman's pain sound unreasonable. I hung up soon after. That night, I drove back to Fairbrook. My mother was in the living room, sitting on the floor, surrounded by old photo albums. The anniversary slideshow was open on her laptop. On the screen was a picture of my parents on their wedding day. My father looked young and proud. My mother looked hopeful. I sat beside her. Does it hurt to look at these? I asked. She studied the photo for a long moment. Yes. Then why are you using them? Because those years existed, she said. I won't let him steal my memories just because he corrupted them. I leaned my head against the couch. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. My mother reached for my hand. Neither did I. For the first time since I had found the messages, I started crying. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, with one hand pressed against my mouth like I could hold myself together. My mother pulled me into her arms, and suddenly I was not 28 anymore. I was a child again, sitting in my mother's lap after a bad dream, only this time the nightmare was real. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shook my head against her shoulder. You didn't do this. No, she said, but I let you believe in him longer than I should have. I pulled back and wiped my face. What do you need me to do? She looked at me carefully. You don't have to do anything. Yes, I do. No, Claire, this is between your father and me. I looked toward the wedding photo on the laptop. Not anymore. Her eyes filled with something I could not name. Maybe sorrow, maybe pride, maybe both. The doorbell rang. We both froze. My mother closed the laptop. Are you expecting someone? I asked. No. The bell rang again. I stood, but my mother touched my arm. I'll get it. She walked to the front door with the same slow control she had carried all week. When she opened it, my father stood on the porch. He looked from her to me, and for the first time his charming smile did not appear. "What's going on?" he asked. My mother held the door halfway open. "Nothing yet." His eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" She looked at him for a long, silent moment. Then she said, "It means you still have time to tell the truth before Saturday." My father's face went pale. Behind him, the porch light buzzed softly in the dark, and in that small silence I knew he understood. My mother was done waiting. For 3 seconds after my mother spoke, no one moved. My father stood on the porch with the light above him casting shadows under his eyes. He looked older in that moment, smaller too. Not because his body had changed, but because the confidence he had worn my entire life had slipped just enough for me to see the fear beneath it. "What are you talking about?" he asked. It was a good performance. If I had not seen the house on Briar Lane with my own eyes, I might have believed him. His voice had just the right amount of confusion. His forehead creased in just the right way. He even glanced at me like he was worried my mother had dragged me into something irrational. My mother did not blink. "You know exactly what I'm talking about, Richard." His jaw tightened. "Margaret," he said quietly, "can we not do this in front of Claire?" That was the first time I truly heard it. Not guilt, not apology, strategy. He was already trying to move the conversation somewhere private, somewhere controlled, somewhere he could bend the truth until it looked like a misunderstanding. I stepped closer to my mother. "No," I said. "You can do it in front of me." My father's eyes shifted to mine. Something flickered there. Panic, maybe, or disappointment that I was no longer standing where he expected me to stand. He lowered his voice. "Claire, sweetheart, whatever your mother told you." "She didn't tell me enough," I said, "but I saw enough." His face changed, only for a second. "But I saw it. My mother saw it too." He looked back at her. "Margaret, let me explain. You had 3 years to explain." "I didn't want to hurt you." A cold laugh escaped my mother. It was so soft it barely counted as a laugh at all. "No," she said, "you didn't want to be caught." He flinched. For the first time in my life, my father had no charming answer ready. The silence between them stretched until the night insects filled it. Finally, my mother opened the door wider. "You can come in," she said, "or you can go home and think very carefully about what kind of man you want to be on Saturday." He stared at her. "This is my home." My mother looked at him with a calmness that frightened me. For now. He did not come inside. He looked at me one time, turned and walked back to his truck. We watched his taillights disappear down the street. Only after he was gone did I realize I had been holding my breath. Saturday arrived with clear skies and a sharp autumn wind. The kind of day people call beautiful when they don't know something terrible is about to happen. The Grace Community Church had a fellowship hall attached to the back of the building. A wide rectangular room with polished floors, folding tables, a small stage, and framed Bible verses on the walls. By 5 o'clock, the place was decorated with white tablecloths, gold ribbons, framed photos of my parents, and a large banner above the stage. Underneath it, someone had added smaller words in gold script. I stood near the entrance and stared at the word family until my eyes burned. My mother arrived at 5:30. She wore a deep navy dress, simple pearl earrings, and low heels. Her hair was swept back neatly. She looked elegant, composed, almost serene. If anyone noticed anything unusual about her, they did not say so. People rushed to greet her. "Margaret, you look beautiful." 30 years, can you believe it? You and Richard are such an inspiration. My mother smiled politely and thanked them all. Every compliment landed like a small slap. My father arrived 10 minutes later. He wore a dark suit and a silver tie. He looked polished, confident, every inch the man Fairbrook believed him to be. If the confrontation on the porch had shaken him, he had recovered well enough to hide it from everyone else. The moment he entered, the room warmed around him. "Richard! There's the man of the hour." "Congratulations, brother." He shook hands. He laughed. He accepted hugs. He placed his hand at the small of my mother's back as if nothing had changed. I watched her body stiffen almost imperceptibly. He leaned close to her and smiled for the people around them. "Margaret," he said through his teeth, "please don't do anything you'll regret." She kept smiling. "I stopped doing that years ago." His smile faltered. A photographer from the church asked them to pose near a table of old photos. My father slipped his arm around her waist. My mother allowed it, but she did not lean into him. "Beautiful," the photographer said. "Richard, look at Margaret." My father turned his head. For one brief second, he actually looked at her. Not at his wife as a prop, not at the woman beside him in public, at her. And maybe he saw something there that scared him, because he looked away first. The room filled quickly. There were neighbors, church members, cousins I had not seen in years, my father's business associates, my mother's book club friends, and half the town's retired population. Everyone ate, laughed, and told stories about Richard and Margaret's marriage as if they had personally built it brick by brick. Pastor Glenn tapped a microphone around 6:15. "Friends, if I could have your attention." The room quieted. My father stood near the stage, smiling modestly. My mother stood beside him, hands folded in front of her. I stood near the back wall because I could not trust myself to sit. Pastor Glenn began with a warm speech about commitment. He spoke about vows, about patience, about forgiveness, about how a good marriage was not built on perfection, but on faithfulness. At that word, my father glanced at my mother. She did not look back. Then the pastor said, "Tonight we also have the honor of recognizing Richard Whitman as our Family Man of the Year." Applause filled the hall. My father lowered his head, pretending to be humbled. I felt physically ill. Pastor Glenn continued, "Richard has been a model of devotion, not only to his wife and daughter, but to this entire community." More applause. My father stepped toward the stage, and then the fellowship hall doors opened. At first, almost no one noticed. A few heads turned. Mine did. Laura Bennett stood in the doorway with Ethan and Sophie. She wore a simple green dress and a beige coat. Her hair was curled softly around her face. She looked nervous but pleased, like someone attending an event where she did not know many people but expected to be welcomed. Ethan stood beside her in a button-down shirt, tugging at the collar like he hated it. Sophie held a small gift bag with gold tissue paper sticking out of the top. My heart clenched. They had dressed up for him, for my father. Laura looked around the room, searching. Then she saw him. Her face brightened. "Richard," she said softly, though the room was quiet enough for several people to hear. My father turned. The applause died slowly, unevenly, like a machine losing power. His face went white. Not pale, white. Laura's smile faded as she looked past him. Her eyes lifted to the banner. I watched the meaning reach her in pieces. First confusion, then disbelief, then horror. Ethan frowned. "Mom," he whispered. Sophie looked at the photos on the table. There were pictures of my father and mother cutting a cake, my father and mother dancing, my father and mother standing beside me at my college graduation. Sophie's small hand tightened around the gift bag. "Why is Dad in all those pictures?" she asked. The question moved through the room like a crack in glass. People began whispering. My father stepped down from the stage. "Laura," he said quickly, "you shouldn't be here." That sentence was the wrong one. Everyone heard it. Laura blinked. "I got an invitation." My father looked at my mother. My mother looked back. No anger, no tears. Only the steady patience of a woman who had waited long enough. "Margaret," he warned, but she had already stepped onto the stage. She took the microphone from Pastor Glenn gently. "Thank you, Pastor," she said. Pastor Glenn looked confused, but he stepped aside. The room became painfully silent. My mother stood beneath the banner celebrating a marriage my father had hollowed out from the inside. She looked at the crowd, then at Laura and the children, then finally at my father. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began. "I know many of you came here to celebrate 30 years of marriage, and I appreciate that. I truly do." Her voice was calm. That made people lean in closer. "For many years, I believed marriage meant protecting the person you loved, protecting their dignity, their name, their place in the world." My father moved toward the stage. "Margaret, stop." She did not look at him. "So I protected Richard's name. I protected it when he missed dinners. I protected it when he lied about business trips. I protected it when I sat alone at holiday tables and smiled because that was what a good wife was supposed to do." A murmur moved through the room. My father reached the stage steps. I stepped in front of him. He looked stunned. "Claire, don't," I said. His eyes hardened. "Move." For the first time in my life, I did not. My mother continued. "But tonight, Richard is being honored as Family Man of the Year. And I realized something. If we are going to honor his family, then we should honor all of it. The room froze. My mother lifted a small remote from the podium. The projector screen behind her lit up. The first image appeared. My father on Laura's porch, holding Sophie in one arm, while Ethan stood beside him in a baseball uniform. Someone gasped. Laura made a sound like the air had been knocked from her lungs. The second image appeared. My father at Ethan's baseball game, clapping behind the fence. The third, my father beside Laura at a 4th of July event. The fourth, a copy of the deed for the house on Briar Lane. The fifth, a bank statement with highlighted payments. Then came the birth certificates. Ethan Michael Bennett, Sophie Grace Bennett, father, Richard Allen Whitman. People were no longer whispering, they were staring. Pastor Glenn's mouth hung slightly open. My father's business partner, Mike Henderson, stepped back as if distance could protect him from scandal. Laura covered her mouth with one hand. Ethan looked at my father, not confused anymore. Something worse, betrayed. My father pushed past me and climbed the steps. That is enough. My mother turned to him. No, Richard, enough was 3 years ago. Enough was when you used our money to buy another woman a house. Enough was when you told her you were divorced. Enough was when you let those children believe they were your only family. Laura's head snapped up. Divorced? She whispered. My father turned toward her. Laura, I can explain. Her face crumpled. You said she was your ex-wife. The room erupted in shocked whispers. My mother lowered the microphone slightly, but her voice still carried. Did he also tell you I was unstable? Laura stared at him. My father said nothing. That silence answered for him. My mother stepped closer to him, still holding the microphone. For 30 years I protected your name, she said. Tonight, you can protect it yourself. My father looked around the room, desperate now, at the pastor, at his friends, at his clients, at me. No one moved toward him. My mother's voice softened, but only slightly. So tell us, Richard. The room became still again. She looked from him to Laura, then to Ethan and Sophie, then back to him. Which life was the lie? My father's lips parted. No sound came out. My mother raised the microphone just a little higher. Mine, she asked, or hers? Laura began to cry silently. Sophie pressed herself against her mother's side. Ethan stood very still, staring at the man he had run to only days earlier. And my father, the man who always had the perfect words, the perfect smile, the perfect answer, stood in front of everyone who had ever admired him and said nothing. My father's silence was louder than any confession. For years, Richard Whitman had built his life on words, warm words, careful words, charming words, words that made people trust him, forgive him, admire him. He knew how to calm a worried client, how to comfort a grieving widow at church, how to make my mother look unreasonable without ever raising his voice. But standing on that stage, beneath a banner celebrating 30 years of marriage, with his wife on one side and his other family on the other, he had nothing. Nothing but a pale face, a clenched jaw, and eyes that kept searching the room for someone willing to save him. No one did. The fellowship hall was so quiet I could hear Sophie crying softly into Laura's coat. My mother lowered the microphone, but she did not step away from my father. Answer me, Richard, she said. Which life was the lie? My father swallowed. Margaret, he said, his voice low, this is cruel. A sound moved through the room, not quite a gasp, more like disbelief. My mother's eyebrows lifted slightly. Cruel? Yes. His voice grew stronger now, as if he had finally found a path. Bringing children into this, humiliating everyone in public? This isn't justice, this is revenge. There it was, the shift, the performance. I watched him reach for the oldest weapon he had, make my mother the problem. For one terrifying second, I wondered if it would work. I looked around the room. Some people looked uncomfortable. A few lowered their eyes. Pastor Glenn looked as if he wanted to disappear into the wall. Scandal was one thing. Watching it unfold in real time was another. But my mother did not flinch. No, Richard, she said. Revenge would have been exposing Laura first. Revenge would have been telling those children before their mother knew. Revenge would have been destroying everything without proof. She raised the folder in her hand. This is not revenge. This is accountability. My father's face hardened. You think this makes you look strong? No, she said. I think telling the truth makes you look exactly as you are. Laura suddenly stepped forward. Her face was wet with tears, but her voice was steady enough to cut through the room. "Richard," she said, "is she your wife?" My father turned toward her. "Laura, please, not here." She shook her head. "Is she your wife?" He looked at my mother, then at the crowd, then at Laura. "Yes," he said finally. Laura took a small step back as if the word had physically struck her. Ethan stared at him. "But you said she wasn't," Ethan whispered. My father's face twisted with something close to pain. "Buddy, don't call me that." Those 4 words broke something in the room. My father froze. Ethan was 12 years old, too young to understand marriage contracts, bank records, legal fraud, or years of emotional betrayal. But he was not too young to understand that his father had lied to his face. Sophie clutched Laura's sleeve and whispered, "Mom, I want to go home." Laura put an arm around her daughter but did not move. Her eyes stayed on my father. "How long?" she asked. He rubbed both hands over his face. "This is complicated." "No," Laura said. "How long?" My father looked exhausted suddenly. Not sorry, just exhausted by the fact that the lie was now requiring more energy than the truth. 12 years, he said. Laura closed her eyes. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Dear God." My mother stood very still. I wondered if hearing him say it out loud hurt her even more, even after everything she knew. Laura opened her eyes again. "You told me she left you." My father said nothing. "You told me she didn't want a family anymore." My hands curled into fists. My mother's changed for the first time that night. It was quick, barely visible, but I saw it. That lie had reached something sacred, because my mother had wanted family. She had built one. She had protected one. She had spent 30 years honoring a home my father had been quietly abandoning one excuse at a time. Laura's voice cracked. "You told me Claire barely spoke to you because your divorce had been hard on her." My stomach dropped. My father turned toward me, and in that moment I saw the full shape of his betrayal. He had not only lied about my mother, he had used me too. Turned me into a character in his story, a distant daughter, a damaged child, an excuse. I stepped forward before I realized I was moving. "Did you?" I asked. His eyes softened in that familiar way. "Claire." "No." My voice shook, but I did not stop. "Don't do that. Don't say my name like you still get to decide what it means." He looked wounded. Once that would have worked on me. Once I would have rushed to repair the hurt in his face, not anymore. I climbed the stage steps and stood beside my mother. The hall blurred at the edges, but I forced myself to look directly at him. "You told her Mom left you?" He said nothing. "You told her I barely spoke to you?" Still nothing. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "You didn't make one mistake, Dad. You made thousands of choices." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand." "I understand enough." "No, you don't." His voice rose. "You think life is simple because you're young. You think people are either good or bad, but marriage is hard. Loneliness is hard. Your mother and I—" "Do not blame her," I snapped. The room went still again. He looked shocked. Maybe because I had never spoken to him like that. Maybe because he had always believed love made me loyal to him first. I felt my mother's hand brush mine, not holding it, just reminding me she was there. "You had a wife who stood beside you for 30 years, I said. "You had a daughter who adored you. You had a home, a reputation, a life most people would be grateful for." My voice cracked, but I kept going. "And every time you drove across town, you chose to lie. Every school game you attended while telling Mom you were working, you chose. Every birthday, every mortgage payment, every big business trip, every time you let Laura believe she was building a future with an honest man, you chose." My father's eyes flashed. "I was trying to do right by everyone." Laura let out a broken laugh. "By lying to everyone? I loved you," he said to her. My mother looked down, not in defeat, in disgust. Laura shook her head slowly. "No. You loved being needed. You loved having 2 homes waiting for you, 2 women trusting you, children running to you. You loved the version of yourself you got to be with us because none of us had the whole truth." For the first time, I saw my father truly lose control. His face reddened. "You think I wanted this?" he demanded. My mother looked up. "Yes," she said. He turned to her. "What?" "You wanted it enough to keep it," she said, "for 12 years. The words landed cleanly. There was nothing dramatic in the way she said them, and that made them impossible to argue with. My father stared at her. Then his expression shifted again, softer, desperate. "Margaret," he said, "I know I hurt you." My mother said nothing. "I know I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" Laura whispered. He ignored her. But we have 30 years together. 30 years. You can't just throw that away because I lost my way. My mother's face was unreadable. You didn't lose your way, Richard. You built another road. He stepped closer. I can fix this. A strange, stunned silence followed. Even now, after everything, he believed the world could be repaired around his comfort. How? My mother asked. He seemed encouraged by the question. We can talk privately as a family. Which family? She asked. His mouth closed. That was the question he could not survive. My mother stepped toward him, holding the microphone so everyone could hear. You have spent years avoiding a choice by lying to everyone. Tonight, you will make one honest choice. He looked around, trapped. What do you want from me? The truth, she said. Tell Laura who I am. Tell Ethan and Sophie who Claire is. Tell this room what you did without blaming me, without blaming loneliness, without blaming circumstances. My father stared at her. She continued. Say it plainly. His lips parted. For 1 second, I thought he might do it. I thought he might finally choose the truth, even if it came too late. But then he looked at the crowd, at the pastor, at his clients, at the people whose admiration had fed him for years, and he could not do it. I'm not going to be put on trial by my own wife, he said. My mother's face softened then, not with forgiveness, with finality. No, she said, you're not. She set the microphone down on the podium, then she reached into her purse and took out a cream-colored envelope. It was thick, plain, sealed. She handed it to him. He looked at it but did not take it. What is this? Your copy? My copy of what? Divorce papers. The words moved through the room like thunder. My father stared at her. Laura covered Sophie's ears too late. My mother placed the envelope against his chest. He had no choice but to take it. There is also a petition for financial disclosure, she said. My attorney has documentation of marital assets used without my consent, including funds tied to the Briar Lane property. My father's hand tightened around the envelope. His voice dropped dangerously. You planned this? Yes. For how long? Long enough to do it correctly. His eyes narrowed. You're going to ruin me. My mother looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, No, Richard, I'm going to stop helping you hide. He looked at me then. Maybe he expected me to cry, to beg them both to stop, to choose him because daughters were supposed to forgive fathers, to protect the memory of who he had been to me. Instead, I stood beside my mother. He swallowed. Claire, he said quietly, I'm still your father. The words should have broken me. They almost did. Because he was. That was the terrible thing. He was still the man who taught me to ride a bike, the man who carried me to bed when I fell asleep on the couch, the man whose voice I looked for in every crowded room when I was a child. But he was also this man, the one holding divorce papers under a banner that praised his devotion, the one who had split every truth in half and handed each family only the piece that served him. I wiped my cheek before I realized I was crying. Then act like one, I said. Tell the truth. He looked at me for a long, painful second. Then he looked away. And there it was, his choice. Not my mother. Not Laura. Not the children. Not me. Himself. Always himself. My mother picked up the microphone one last time. Her voice was quiet now, but it carried through every corner of the hall. You don't have to choose me anymore, Richard, she said. I already chose myself. No one applauded. It was not that kind of moment. But something shifted in the room. People moved away from my father without meaning to. A small, widening circle formed around him as if the truth had made him contagious. Laura took Ethan's hand. Sophie pressed against her side, crying softly. My father looked at them. Laura, wait. She shook her head. You don't get to ask me to wait. Please. You made me the other woman in a marriage I didn't even know existed. Her voice broke on the last word. Then she looked at my mother. I didn't know. My mother's expression changed. For the first time that night, her face showed open grief. I believe you, she said. Laura nodded once, tears falling freely now. Then she turned and walked toward the doors with Ethan and Sophie. My father started after them. Ethan looked back. Don't, he said. One word. Small. Final. My father stopped. The doors opened. Cold evening air swept into the hall. Then Laura and the children were gone. My father stood alone beneath the anniversary banner, holding the envelope my mother had given him. The Family Man of the Year award still sat on a small table near the stage, polished and waiting. No one touched it. No one mentioned it. And for the first time in my life, I saw my father exactly as he was. Not larger than life, not beloved, not untouchable, just a man surrounded by the wreckage of every lie he thought he could keep. No one knew what to do after Laura walked out. That was the strangest part. After a truth like that, you expect noise, shouting, crying, chairs scraping, people rushing toward the exits. But for several seconds, the fellowship hall remained frozen in a silence so thick it felt almost physical. My father stood beneath the anniversary banner, still holding the envelope my mother had given him. Divorce papers. 30 years of marriage reduced to a cream-colored packet in his hand. Pastor Glenn finally stepped forward, his face pale. "Richard," he said softly, "maybe it would be best if we ended the evening here." My father looked at him as if he had been betrayed. "You're asking me to leave?" The pastor's eyes moved briefly to my mother, then back to him. "I'm asking everyone to go home." But everyone understood what he meant. For years, the town had opened doors for Richard Whitman. They had saved him seats, trusted his word, laughed at his stories, invited him into their homes, and pointed to him as the kind of man other men should try to be. Now no one wanted to stand too close to him. My father looked around the room, searching for a familiar face to rescue him. His business partner, Mike, suddenly became very interested in his shoes. One of the church elders turned away. A woman from my mother's book club quietly walked over and put her arm around my mother's shoulders. That simple gesture almost broke me. My mother did not cry, not then. She only nodded once and said, "Thank you." My father saw it. His mouth tightened. "You're all enjoying this," he said. No one answered. He turned to my mother. "You got what you wanted." My mother looked exhausted now. Not weak, not uncertain. Just exhausted in the way a person becomes after carrying something heavy for too long and finally setting it down. "No, Richard," she said. "What I wanted was a faithful husband." His face changed, but he said nothing. There was nothing left to say that would help him. I watched him walk out of the fellowship hall alone. Not with his wife. Not with Laura. Not with his children. Alone. The door closed behind him, and for the first time all evening, my mother's shoulders dropped. I went to her immediately. "Mom." She looked at me, and the control on her face cracked just enough for me to see the grief underneath. "I need to go home," she whispered. "I'll take you." We left through the side door to avoid the crowd. Outside, the evening air was cold. The sky had turned deep blue, and the church parking lot lights hummed above us. My mother walked carefully, one hand holding her purse, the other pressed lightly against her stomach as if she were keeping herself together by force. When we reached my car, she stopped. Across the parking lot, Laura was standing beside her car with Ethan and Sophie. Ethan's arms were crossed tightly over his chest. Sophie was crying into Laura's coat. Laura looked like a woman who had aged years in 1 hour. My mother looked at them. For a moment, I thought she would keep walking. Instead, she crossed the parking lot. I followed a few steps behind her. Laura saw us coming and stiffened. "I'm sorry," Laura said immediately. "I'm so sorry. I swear to you, I didn't know." My mother stopped in front of her. "I believe you." Laura covered her mouth and looked away. "I thought he was divorced," she said. "He told me you had been separated for years. He told me you only stayed legally married because of finances and family pressure." My mother closed her eyes briefly. Of course he had. My father had never simply lied. He had built stories strong enough for other people to live inside. Ethan stared at me. His eyes were red, angry, and confused. "Are you really his daughter?" he asked. The question hit me in a place I wasn't ready for. I nodded. "Yes." He looked down. "So you're my sister?" I didn't know what to say. Legally, biologically, painfully, yes. But emotionally, we were strangers standing in the wreckage of one man's selfishness. "I guess we are," I said quietly. He turned his face away. Sophie peeked out from behind Laura. She looked at my mother and whispered, "Did we do something wrong?" My mother's face changed completely. All the steel disappeared. She bent slightly, careful not to move too close and scare her. "No, sweetheart," she said gently. "You didn't do anything wrong." Sophie's lip trembled. "Then why is everyone mad?" Laura began crying again. My mother looked at her and something passed between them. Not friendship, not forgiveness, something sadder and more honest. Recognition. Two women who had been standing on opposite sides of the same lie. "We're not mad at you," my mother said. "None of this is your fault." Laura nodded, pressing a hand over Sophie's hair. Then she looked at my mother. What happens now? My mother took a slow breath. I don't know everything, but my attorney will contact Richard. You should get one too. Laura's eyes widened slightly. My mother continued, for your children, for the house, for whatever he promised you. Laura looked stunned. You're helping me? No, my mother said softly. I'm telling you not to trust him to be honest just because he's been exposed. Laura absorbed that. Then she nodded. Thank you. My mother did not answer. She simply turned and walked back toward my car. That night, she did not sleep. Neither did I. We sat in the kitchen until almost dawn, drinking tea that went cold in our cups. The house felt different. Not empty yet, but exposed. Every room carried evidence of the life my mother had thought she had. The framed wedding portrait in the hallway, my father's coat still hanging by the door, his favorite mug in the cabinet, the recliner in the living room where he used to fall asleep during baseball games. By morning, my mother had removed her wedding ring. She placed it in a small ceramic bowl beside the sink. I stared at it for a long time. Does it feel strange? I asked. She looked at the ring. Yes. Do you feel free? She thought about that. Not yet, she said, but I feel awake. In the weeks that followed, Fairbrook did what small towns always do. It whispered. It judged. It pretended not to judge. Some people called my mother brave. Some called her cold. A few said she should have handled it privately, which was just another way of saying they preferred women to suffer quietly so everyone else could stay comfortable. My mother ignored them. Her attorney filed the divorce petition. Financial investigators began reviewing accounts tied to my father's business and personal assets. The Briar Lane house became part of a much larger legal mess than my father had expected. For the first time in his life, charm could not fix everything. Laura hired an attorney, too. I did not know everything that happened between her and my father after that. I only knew he moved into a furnished apartment near the highway and started leaving long voicemails for everyone who no longer answered his calls. He called my mother. She did not pick up. He called Laura. She blocked him. He called me. For 2 weeks, I let every call go to voicemail. The first messages were defensive. Claire, you need to understand there are things your mother doesn't know. Then they became wounded. I never meant to hurt you. Then lonely. You're still my daughter. Please don't shut me out. I listened to each one once. Then I deleted them. Not because I didn't care, because I cared too much, and I knew that if I let his voice pull me backward, I might spend the rest of my life trying to rescue a man from consequences he had earned. A month after the anniversary party, I agreed to meet him. Not at his apartment, not at my mother's house. At a small coffee shop outside town where no one knew us well enough to stare. He was already sitting in a corner booth when I arrived. For a second, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked older. His hair was uncombed, his face unshaven, his shoulders slumped beneath a gray jacket. Without the suit, without the smile, without a room full of people admiring him, he looked painfully ordinary. Claire, he said, standing. I did not hug him. He noticed. We sat across from each other. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Thank you for coming." I nodded. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. "I've lost everything." I looked at him carefully. There it was again. Not I hurt everyone. Not I destroyed 2 families. I've lost everything. The center of the sentence was still him. "You lost trust," I said. "That's not the same as losing everything." He looked down. "I know I made terrible mistakes." I took a breath. Dad, mistakes are forgetting an anniversary, missing a call, saying something cruel in an argument. You had another family for 12 years. His eyes filled. I loved them. I believe you. He looked up, surprised. And I loved you and Mom, too. That's the part that hurts, I said, because maybe you did, but your love didn't protect anyone except yourself. His mouth tightened. I don't know how to fix this. You may not be able to. The words seemed to land hard. He looked toward the window. I'm still your father. I felt my throat burn. I know. Does that mean nothing? No, I said. That's why this hurts so much. He closed his eyes. For the first time, he looked less like a liar trying to escape and more like a man finally standing in the ruins. But I had learned something from my mother. Pity was not the same as forgiveness, and forgiveness was not the same as access. I don't hate you, I said. He opened his eyes. But I don't trust you, and I don't know when I will, or if I will. A tear slipped down his cheek. I had seen my father cry before, at funerals, at my graduation. During old movies he pretended didn't affect him. This time I did not reach across the table. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I wanted those words to fix something. They didn't. "I hope you mean that someday in a way that isn't about what you lost," I said. Then I stood. "Claire." I paused. He looked at me like a desperate man looking at a closed door. "Will you call me?" I looked at him for a long moment. "When I'm ready." Then I walked out. 6 months later, my mother sold the house. I thought she would be devastated, but on moving day, she stood in the empty living room and looked around with a calm expression. "This house was beautiful," she said. It was. I used to think leaving it would mean he took everything from me. I looked at her. "What do you think now?" She smiled faintly. "I think it's just a house." She bought a smaller place near a lake 40 minutes away. It had a screened porch, a narrow kitchen, and windows that caught the morning light. She painted the front door blue. She planted lavender along the walkway. She joined a local library group where no one knew her as Richard Whitman's wife, just Margaret. The first Sunday I visited, she made coffee and we sat on the porch wrapped in sweaters, watching the lake ripple under a pale sky. She looked peaceful, not healed completely, but no longer waiting. On the small table between us sat a wooden box. I recognized it from the old house. It was where she kept sentimental things: postcards, childhood drawings, old theater tickets, dried flowers. She opened it and took out her wedding ring. For a moment she held it in her palm. "Do you regret waiting so long?" I asked. She ran her thumb over the band. "No," she said slowly. "I regret trusting him with parts of myself he didn't deserve. But I don't regret waiting until I could leave with the truth in my hands." Then she placed the ring inside the box and closed the lid. The sound was small, final. I looked out at the water. For so many years I had thought the worst thing that could happen to a family was the truth coming out. I was wrong. The worst thing was living inside a lie so long that everyone forgot how to breathe. That night at the church, my father had been forced to choose in front of everyone. But the truth was, my mother had already made the only choice that mattered. She chose her dignity. She chose her freedom. And finally, after 30 years of standing beside a man who had made her feel invisible, she chose herself.